So picture this, a massive underground silo stretching 144 levels into the earth, where generations of people have lived, worked, and died without ever seeing the sky. The outside world? Toxic and deadly, or at least that's what they've always been told. Enter Hugh Howey's Wool, a post-apocalyptic novel that takes the dystopian surveillance state of 1984 and blends it with the social engineering of Brave New World, all wrapped in a tight claustrophobic setting reminiscent of bomb shelters from the Fallout video game series. What started as a self-published short story in 2011 quickly became a phenomenon. Wool is a testament to the power of indie publishing and grassroots word of mouth. And now with an Apple TV adaptation, Wool has cemented its place in the dystopian sci-fi pantheon. But here's the question. Does Wool do anything new, or is it just a recycled dystopia packaged for modern audiences? Before we go forward, a spoiler warning. I'm discussing the novel and its themes in depth, so if you haven't read the book or watched the Apple TV series it's based on, you may want to bookmark this review and come back to it. In the subterranean world of Wool, humanity's remnants reside within a colossal underground silo. Picture a self-sustaining, self-contained society governed by stringent laws and a rigid hierarchy where the most egregious transgression is expressing a desire to leave. These daring individuals are condemned to cleaning, which is a ritual where they're equipped with protective suits and sent outside into a toxic wasteland to wipe clean the cameras that provide the silo's only glimpse of the external world. Inevitably, these cleaners perish shortly after their departure. The narrative begins with Holston, the silo sheriff, who, driven by grief over his wife's earlier cleaning, voluntarily requests to leave. His departure sets off a series of events that leads to an appointment of Juliet, a resourceful and determined mechanic from the silo's lower levels, as the new sheriff. As Juliet assumes her role, she becomes increasingly aware that the silo's leadership, particularly the IT department and its leader Bernard, is concealing critical truths about their existence. Her investigation uncovers a web of deceit, revealing that the silo is part of a larger system of multiple silos, each isolated and manipulated to maintain control over its inhabitants. Juliet's relentless pursuit of the truth and her subsequent rebellion against the oppressive regime highlights themes of power, control, and the human spirit's resilience in the face of systemic deception. Her journey not only challenges the established order within her own silo, but also raises profound questions about the nature of freedom and the lengths to which those in power will go to preserve their dominion. In essence, Wool is an exploration of a dystopian society where the quest for knowledge becomes a revolutionary act, and the discovery of hidden truths all has the potential to dismantle the very foundations of their confined world. Alright, let's get into it. Is Wool actually good? Well, it's complicated. I have to admit, I really don't understand the love it gets. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but there are also a lot that feels undercooked, recycled, or just plain frustrating. Let's start with the premise. A massive underground silo, a toxic outside world, and a society built on lies. It's a setup that feels familiar, especially if you've played the Fallout games or read classic dystopian novels like 1984 or Brave New World. And while Howey does a decent job of building tension, the setting itself doesn't feel particularly unique. It's more of a remix of existing dystopian tropes than a groundbreaking new vision. Where Wool really shines, though, is in its opening act. The mini-story about Sheriff Holston and his wife is gripping and delivers a really powerful emotional punch. Holston's grief, Allison's defiance, and the brutal reveal of the silo's deception, it's all executed with a level of suspense and emotional depth that sets incredibly high expectations for the rest of the novel. Unfortunately, the subsequent chapters struggle to maintain that momentum. Once Juliet takes center stage, the story shifts to a more conventional narrative. And while Juliet is a passable protagonist, the writing often feels flat, lacking the vividness that could elevate her journey. Narrative transitions are abrupt, and certain plot points feel underdeveloped, as if Howey was in a rush to get to the next big reveal. This is especially evident in the novel's conclusion, which ends prematurely, leaving significant threads unresolved. I get that Wool is the first installment in a trilogy, so some openness is expected, but the abruptness of the ending feels more like an oversight than a deliberate narrative choice. That said, let's take a step back for a second, because I think the bones are there. The themes of systemic deception, authoritarian control, and class struggle are all present, and they're ripe for exploration. But here's the thing. Wool doesn't fully realize that potential. It introduces these big ideas but doesn't dig deep enough to make them truly resonate. It's like Howey built this incredible framework but didn't quite finish the house. So is Wool good? It's okay. It's a solid entry point for newcomers to dystopian fiction, and is certainly entertaining if you're looking for a fast-paced, plot-driven read. But if you're coming to it with high expectations, especially if you've already read the classics, you might find yourself wishing it had more to say. And that's where the real frustration lies. Wool feels like it's holding back, like it's afraid to fully commit to the themes it introduces. But here's the good news. Even if the novel itself doesn't fully explore these ideas, we can. And that's exactly what we're going to do next. Let's dive into Wool through a Marxist lens and see what hidden depth we can uncover. The silo structure is not just a setting, but a materialization of class division. The upper levels house political leaders, administrators, and the elite, while the lower levels are populated by mechanics, laborers, and essential workers. The people in power enjoy a more comfortable existence, less physically demanding work, and a greater access to information, while those below keep the system running, performing grueling labor with little agency or knowledge of the broader structure controlling their lives. This vertical hierarchy mirrors the dynamic in H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, where the Eloi live in blissful ignorance above while the Morlocks toil below, maintaining the systems that support the Eloi's lifestyle. However, while Wells presents this divide as a result of unchecked capitalist development, Wool operates within the illusion of stability, a society built on lies rather than historic inevitability. The silo embodies how capitalism structures space. Just as skyscrapers and cyberpunk novels visually reinforce class hierarchy, the silo's verticality enforces physical and social segregation. The underground setting reflects a darker truth. The working class is hidden, buried beneath those who would benefit from their labor, allowing the powerful to ignore their existence until the system falters. However, Wool misses an opportunity to examine the historical forces that led to this rigid structure. There's little discussion of how the division of power was established, how power consolidated, or why the ruling class maintains control beyond simple authoritarianism. This is where Wool falls short as a dystopian novel. It presents class oppression, but doesn't interrogate its origins or the mechanisms that perpetuate it. Unlike Orwell's 1984, which dissects surveillance and control, or Huxley's Brave New World, which explores how capitalism pacifies rather than punishes, Wool's primarily focuses on individual resistance over systemic critique. While this focus isn't inherently problematic, its execution leaves something to be desired. By the time the mechanics actively resist their oppression, their plight hasn't been explored in enough depth to fully engage the reader. One of the most insidious aspects of capitalist ideology is how power disguises itself as necessity. In Wool, the lower class workers accept their roles not because they are content, but because they have been conditioned to believe there is no alternative. Upward social mobility is rare, and interactions between different levels are virtually non-existent, and this reinforces the illusion of a fixed, unchangeable social order. The people in the silo don't just live under authoritarian rule, they don't even realize they're being ruled. Unlike 1984, where the oppression is obvious, or Brave New World, where control is disguised as pleasure, Wool constructs a world where the most powerful tool of control is ignorance itself. If you look deep enough, Wool explores how authoritarianism strives when people accept the narratives they are given, without ever questioning who is shaping them. The ruling class does not need to actively suppress rebellion all the time. They only need to carefully curate the reality so that the idea of rebellion never fully forms. This is what makes the silo such an effective totalitarian system. The residents of the silo are trapped not just physically, but mentally. Every piece of historical knowledge has been rewritten or erased. They believe the world outside is a toxic wasteland, uninhabited and deadly. They believe that questioning the status quo is dangerous, even treasonous. This is a fundamental tactic of authoritarian regimes. In 1984, history is rewritten daily by the party so that no one can challenge the state's version of reality. In Wool, history is erased entirely, leaving only the carefully curated truth provided by those in power. Because if people don't know the truth, they have no reason to fight for it. In authoritarian systems, compliance is the most effective when it doesn't feel like it's coercion. The silo's rulers don't maintain power through brute force alone. They maintain it through self-policing and fear of the unknown. The most effective example of this is the ritual of cleaning. When someone questions the system, They're exiled. They're sent outside in the protective suit to wipe the cameras that provide the silo's only view of the outside world. This serves two functions. The first is that it eliminates dissent by publicly removing traitors. The second is that it reinforces that the silo is the only safe place in existence. But here's the horrifying part. The suits are sabotaged on purpose. The ruling class ensures that anyone who steps outside dies no matter what. This is manufactured reality at its most insidious. A world where people believe in their own imprisonment because they have never been given a reason to doubt it. In Wool, the real power isn't in the hands of the elected officials or in the nominal leadership of the silo. It lies within the IT department. This is not accidental. In modern authoritarian regimes, information is the most valuable currency of control. The IT department serves as the omniscient observer, managing everything from historical records to surveillance systems. Bernard, the head of IT, he functions as a big brother figure. Not in the sense that he directly monitors everyone, but in that he ensures no one has access to knowledge that would threaten the system. This reflects a modern twist on authoritarian control. While Orwell imagined a world where governments use mass surveillance and brute force to maintain power, Wool presents a more subtle dystopia, where power is maintained through carefully restricted access to information. This is strikingly relevant in the 21st century, where access to uncensored knowledge is one of the most contested battlegrounds. Governments and corporations don't need to destroy books or burn records, although they've been doing plenty of that recently. They can simply control what information people see through digital algorithms, media monopolies, and state-controlled narratives. The system relies on several key areas of control. The first is that the education is restricted so that people never learn the truth. The second is that history is erased so no one questions the past. The third is the fear of the unknown is weaponized to keep people from rebelling. Sound familiar? In this way, Wool presents a frighteningly realistic dystopia with a system designed to sustain itself indefinitely. So if Wool isn't as good as other dystopian novels, why read it? For one, it's one of the most accessible dystopian novels out there. Unlike Orwell, Atwood, or Le Guin, who can be thematically dense, philosophically demanding, or linguistically complex, Wool reads like a sci-fi thriller. The pacing is fast, the stakes are high, and the world is immediately immersive. Or at least in the beginning. It doesn't require you to wade through Orwellian manifestos on doublethink or Le Guin's deep explorations of anarchist philosophy. It just pulls you in and keeps you reading. For newcomers to dystopian fiction, Wool is an excellent entry point. It introduces core themes of oppression, social control, and authoritarianism without overwhelming the reader with heavy exposition or complex ideological frameworks. If you've ever been intimidated by classic literature, Wool is a great way to ease into dystopian fiction before tackling The Dispossessed, 1984, or The Handmaid's Tale. Take Wool for what it is, an entry point. A book that pulls you in, makes you question, and leaves you hungry for more. And that there is the real power of dystopian fiction. Because if you start asking questions here, who knows where you'll end up? Now, if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends, family, and even your enemies. Just not the IT department at my job. I don't need them breathing down my neck. And of course, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button because every subscriber inches me one step closer to taking over the Galaxies. Until next time, take care, keep reading, and I'll see you in the next one.